We got to begin with the big news involving Jake Paul. Jake Paul is back June 28th, Honda Center in Ontario, and he is going to face your Mexican brethren, Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. Now, that fight we can talk about, but what's also interesting is that Gilberto Ramirez is going to be on the undercard of this fight. This is a Golden Boy MVP co-promotion. Ramirez is going to defend against Uniel Dorticos, who is a big puncher at cruiserweight. Let's start with the news that Jake is going to fight Chavez Jr. You have been a long-standing and proud Jake Paul critic. Your thoughts on Jake taking on Julio Cesar Chavez Jr.?
I don't know if you remember a few years ago, I would say 2, 3 years ago, I actually recommended this as an opponent on an episode of Jabs. I said, Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. will be a perfect fit for this whole Jake Paul experiment, of him wanting to one day fight for a world title. And it makes sense to fight a former champion, a guy with a famous last name like Chavez, a known quitter like Chavez Jr. This is a guy that's quit before on the stool with Fonfara and with Daniel Jacobs. So we know he doesn't have that Mexican fight all the way. He's 39 years old. He's been very inactive. I think he's had like one fight, and he fought a guy that was 1-0 in the last 3.5 years. So he checks every single box of the right risk, and it's a high reward for a very, very, very low risk. So once again, I got to hand it to Jake Paul because this is a legitimate former champion, a legitimate threat. And they're going to have that fight at the Honda Center where they're going to have a great demographic of Hispanic fans, and they're going to have the right demographic that hits the Jake Paul Caucasian fans. So all in all, man, this man, I got to give him credit. I got to start giving Jake Paul credit, especially if he knocks out a guy like Chavez Jr., something Canelo couldn't do. There's another feather in the cap. So this man is moving all the right chess pieces, man. He really is. So I'm starting to just say, you know what? I got to give him his due. I got to give him his props.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of social media backlash to Jake Paul against Chavez, and I don't really get it. As a boxer, Jake Paul is really 2-1. If you strip away some of the events that he's taken place, the MMA fighters that he's fought, the basketball players, the Mike Tysons, he has fought 3 actual boxers. Tommy Fury was first on that list. Then there was Andre August, Ryan Borland. I guess if you want to throw Mike Perry onto there, a bare knuckle guy, you could call him 3-1. But either way, he has fought a very limited diet of actual boxers. If you had just any other prospect, take away the name Jake Paul, any other young fighter, and you said that this guy at 2-1 or 3-1 was going to fight Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., you probably wouldn't blink at that. In fact, you'd probably be kind of impressed by that. I mean, Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. is not what he used to be. He is maybe a decade removed from being a viable contender at 160, 168, 175 now, up at 200 pounds. But he is a legitimate boxer. He is a former world champion, and he will be, I think, the toughest test of Jake Paul's boxing career. Sergio, we have called a lot of fights, including this past weekend, where young fighters with limited resumes fight guys that are horrible. I'll use Joel Iriarte as an example. He was on the televised version of the DAZN broadcast, fought a guy named Marcos Jimenez who had a glossy record, who stunk, went down with one shot, and it was over. We don't blink at stuff like that because Joel Iriarte is younger. He's not very well known. He's trying to build up his resume. Jake Paul, as a boxer, has a very limited resume. And this is, for Jake Paul, the boxer, a step-up kind of fight. So I have no problem with this fight whatsoever. In fact, I'm actually impressed that Jake Paul is taking on a fighter who has the pedigree of Julio Cesar Chavez Jr.
No, I'm impressed as well because whether you want to say a lot of things on Chavez Jr., you can say a lot of negative things about him. I mean, he's lazy, he's unreliable, he's a quitter. You can go on and on. But when he trains and he's well prepared and he's motivated, He's still a former champion, and he's still a big fighter. That for 3, 4, 5, maybe half of the first half of the fight, he's gonna be a threat. He's a big guy that throws a vicious body punches, especially that vicious left hook to the liver. He takes a big punch. He'll keep coming. So if he's in shape, he's gonna be very, very hard to beat in 6, 7 rounds. The thing that really worries me with Chavez Jr. is that you can't rely on him to go past 5 rounds and still have any kind of fight. So if Jake Paul really comes into this fight prepared, like we know he is, and comes in with a game plan and strategy to carry this guy into the second half of the fight and actually try to try to outfight him in certain parts and outbox him in certain parts and frustrate him, kind of like Anderson Silva did. Anderson Silva wasn't a boxer, but he was an MMA guy, but he was able to frustrate Chavez Jr. There's way to frustrate guys like this that get hit so easily. If Jake Paul could start jabbing and boxing backwards and on the inside try to muscle him and body shots, moving him backwards like Daniel Jacobs was doing, there's ways to making Chavez Jr. find a way out. Because once a fighter quits one time, it's gonna be easier to do it the second time around. And Chavez Jr. has done it twice. So guess how easy it's gonna be the third time around. So Jake Paul has a clear avenue for a great win, the biggest win of his career, a win against a former world champion. That's incredible for a guy that has a dozen fights. I got to give him his credit.
And again, you keep saying a dozen fights, and it's technically true, but a lot of those wins were against non-boxers. They were against other influencers. They were against MMA fighters. You really have to look at just those 3 fights: Tommy Fury, Ryan Borland, and Andre August. 3 guys that were effectively full-time boxers. And at 2-1, to be taking on Julio Cesar Chavez, I think that is a perfectly acceptable opponent. What I found interesting, though, Sergio, is that he is doing this fight with Gilberto Ramirez on the undercard. Gilberto Ramirez, the unified champion at 200 pounds. He's going to face Yuniel Dorticos. Dorticos, first of all, that fight is a good fight. Like, it may only resonate with the boxing purists, the people out there that were watching the World Boxing Super Series, many years ago, that watched Dorticos, watched his power, knows that this guy has only lost to Murat Gassiev, who was elite at 200 pounds, Maris Briedis, who was elite at 200 pounds. Dorticos, I think, has 27 wins, 25 of them come by knockout. That is going to be a banger. But if Ramirez can get through that, I can't help but think, are we setting up a Jake Paul versus Gilberto Ramirez fight? Now, Oscar De La Hoya told me last weekend that there have been no conversations about a Jake Paul Ramirez fight. I don't think it would happen in 2025. But if Jake looks impressive, beating Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., and Gilberto Ramirez is still a world champion when we get to 2026, I got to believe it's coming, Sergio. I got to believe we're going to see a Jake Paul versus Zurdo Ramirez fight, because Zurdo Ramirez is just big enough a name to put himself in the mix for a Jake Paul fight. What do you think?
No, forget the name. He has a world championship.
Yeah, but that doesn't matter. Lots of guys have world championships, right? Like he doesn't need someone just with a belt. He can go to the cruiserweight guys right now and fight one of them with a world title. He needs a name. He needs a belt and a name. And Gilberto Ramirez is starting to get a little bit of both.
Zurdo will wipe the floor with Jake Paul. So look, Chavez Jr. Chavez Jr. is a respectable fight for him, because Chavez Jr., like I said, he's a known quitter. He's 39 years old. He's been very inactive. But you're dealing with Zurdo Ramirez. He's going to be bigger, taller, stronger, a real fighter, someone that doesn't quit, someone that takes a big shot, someone that's a southpaw, 6'3". It's all wrong for Jake Paul. So look, I know the fighters that you just mentioned that Jake Paul fought, that are technically fighters or athletes or whatever you want to call them, they fit the Jake Paul agenda. They fit what he was trying to accomplish and what he was trying to do and learn how to box. But when you're dealing with a real champion, a 2-division champion, someone that's already been through all that. He's only lost one time. And that's to Dimitri Bivol, an incredibly great boxer. This is the goods. Zurdo Ramirez is a real champion, a real fighter, and he will kick the hell out of Jake Paul if they ever fought. That fight will be a one-sided beatdown. It would look like Mike Tyson versus Jake Paul. I mean, this wouldn't be a real fight, but that's what happens when you get a real professional fighter, a champion like Zurdo against a wannabe like Jake Paul. Chavez Jr. get away with. Zurdo Ramirez, you won't.